Has Pep Guardiola had a disproportionate effect tactically on the rest of the Premier League? I can show you multiple managers, one league, in 10 stages. Hi, I'm Wayne and welcome to Goals by the Numbers. Let's just get straight into it. So, I recently watched an interview with Bastian Schweinsteiger where he was saying that after Pep Guardiola came to Germany, he noticed a trend of more and more managers starting to play out from the back. And it got me thinking, when I look at the Premier League and watch the matches, there seems to be more and more teams who are trying to make use of playing out from the back. On one hand, I think it's nice to see that football has evolved from just kicking it long and hoping that the big man up front will win the ball in the air and you'll progress from that to more of a European style. But I can't remember a time when I've seen a method of teams playing in a league all kind of turn and follow essentially one person. And if we remember, this is a league that's had Arsene Wenger and Alex Ferguson. And can we say that other teams have really tried to copy them, at least domestically? So, our introduction. Let's call it the modern game, playing out from the back. In modern day football, at least in the Premier League, we have an emergence of a type of play which is essentially what we're just going to call playing out from the back. This approach essentially involves initiating attacks by circulating possession amongst the defenders and the goalkeeper, more often than not, and use that as a means of retaining possession before finding a means of passing the ball forward whilst retaining said possession. This is a trend which has increased in the Premier League as teams use it as teams move towards a more proactive possession-based system or for each individual team. When you contrast this to how the Premier League teams used to play in the early 90s, because the Premier League's first season was in 1993, and for some that is the true when football started in England. When you contrast how teams used to play then, back in those days, it was a bit more direct. There was a lot more long ball, which we don't really see anymore these days. And it seemed to be based more around physicality and pure strength. So a strong team would be able to impact the match simply by just being stronger than the others and knocking it long. So strategic benefits of retaining possession and playing out from the back. As I touched on before, it allows teams to maintain possession and dictate the tempo of the game. So a team can essentially have the ball between their centre backs, pass the ball at a slow pace, and when the opposition has a player who charges in to try and take the ball or take possession, that could be used as a trigger to start to move the ball up the pitch through various players at an increased tempo to get towards your opponent's goal. And the whole point of playing out from the back is, or as you attack, is it creates opportunities by exploiting the space left by opponent players who've moved out of their formation, shape, system, however you want to call it. So, of course, one thing I should clarify is Guardiola didn't create possession-based football or playing out from the back. It has something which actually has been seen in English football before. Now, I had to do a bit of googling, but names like Arthur Rowe, Jimmy Hogan, never heard of them before, but they were proponents of trying to play a system of playing out from the back way back when in English football, when it was the First Division and not the Premier League. Also in the 1950s, there was the Hungarian national team who also used a similar method of playing, but their football was based more on the concept we now know or we refer to as total football, which is the case of a player can move into a position and a teammate will cover him whilst also trying to retain possession. So they're a bit more fluid in their movement. And it wasn't just the centre backs starting playing out from the back. Another player could drop in and replace the centre back and also do the same thing. So over the years, at least over the last 70 years, there have been various other managers who attempted to do similar things, but I couldn't find a manager who had the level of success that Guardiola did with his Barcelona team, his Bayern Munich team, and then moving on to the Manchester City team. So not only has playing out from the back resulted in a method, a tactical method which much more managers are now adopting and using in the Premier League, but essentially it's also resulted in more tactical shifts and a more fluid way of setting your team up. So, for example, as I mentioned before, historically Premier League teams used to favour a more direct method of play, and formations like 4-4-2 were common among nearly every team in the Premier League, especially in the early days. I remember vaguely Liverpool in the mid 90s, so let's say 96, 95, playing with wingbacks, and that being a big talking point. Like, why would a team play a 3-5-2? That's a bit. I remember actually one person saying that's a bit foreign, which I found a bit of a strange thing to say, but I digress. From the mid 2010s, playing out from the back gained more traction in the league, and this was cemented when Guardiola moved to the Premier League in 2016. In fact, if you look at some of the players that were bought before he arrived, as Jose Mourinho correctly pointed out, players who were technically adept, Manchester City went out to start to sign so that when he did join, he was able to play the football he wanted to play because he had players who were capable of playing it. A bit like the point that I sometimes raise, and I've heard others raise the same thing with Manchester United and Amorim, to go off on a tangent, is it's one thing hiring a manager who has a system, and that's absolutely fine. But if the players can't play the system, what exactly do you expect the manager to be doing? Anyway, we're not going to complain. We're going to stay on point. We're going to stay on point today. Um, Having playing out from the back became easier when there was rule change. I want to say in the 2010s, which meant that a goalkeeper was allowed to pass the ball, and we already had goalkeepers who were able to leave the area, which meant that playing out from the back, you could really utilize the goalkeeper and not just knock it back to him like the good old days, and he could pick it up, and then you'd be able to reset and go from there. Um, in terms of strategic benefits, or benefit you can apply strategically, um, more and more managers are are realizing that in certain scenarios, being able to control a game through possession is highly beneficial. So if your team has a if your team can be exposed in a particular way by the opposition, retaining the ball just means there's less opportunities for the opposition to impact you because they don't have the ball to do it in the first place. Something you'll notice in Premier League matches is some teams, let's say for example, no, stick at Manchester City. Let's say Manchester City are playing a team who is bottom of the league. Manchester City are doing really well. There's like 8 games to go to the end of the season. You will typically notice that Manchester City will have more possession than the other team. Because the other team realizes that strategically, they can't keep the ball away from Manchester City. So their best option is to give them the ball and wait for a mistake, essentially. So, Pep Guardiola arrived at the Premier League July 2016. Immediately started to bring some players in, remove some players. I remember at the time, Joe Hart, who'd been Manchester City's goalkeeper for quite a while, was quickly moved on in favour of a ball playing goalkeeper. Who I want to say, I think his name was Bravo? Yeah, I think it was Bravo, but I digress. Um, Pep Guardiola came into Manchester City being known as a manager who favoured a possession based method of playing, intricate play, and playing out from the back. And this almost seemed to be a it almost seemed to mark a moment where the league decided we are all going to become very possession based and utilise playing out from the back. Um, Guardiola's success almost entrenched the views of other managers when they realised that he was getting results from the way he was playing. Manchester City also had a season where they gained over 100 points, winning. It took a while for them to win the Champions League, but up to that point, they were winning titles, trophies here, there, and everywhere. And I think their only real consistent competitor was Liverpool, and their manager at the time, being Jurgen Klopp, played a brand of football which was just extreme pressing from the front. And I think even towards the end of his time, even he moved towards a more possession-based approach, simply because having your players constantly chasing the ball just left more gaps and it wasn't sustainable. When it comes to Guardiola's approach in a match situation, how do we break down and deconstruct what he's trying to achieve tactically or playing out from the back? So as we discussed before on the channel, Ederson is regarded as a super keeper. Effectively, when Manchester City have possession of the ball, he's not just a sweeper keeper. The sweeping part results in him effectively coming out of his box a certain distance and being an extra playmaker, so an 11th man on the pitch. Now, the other team will only have 10, so immediately they're already numerically in a bad situation, for want of a better word or phrase. You've then got two central defenders. For example, let's say John Stones and Ruben Diaz. Now, their ball would literally be, their game, or their idea would literally be to maintain the possession between the two of them, using Ederson where possible. And once the other team has put themselves in a scenario where they can be played around, between the three of them, they will initiate a pass or a line breaking pass to move the ball further up the pitch into the area where the midfielders can then get involved. Now, in terms of the midfielders, you've got a player like Rodri, and his whole game, well, not his whole game, not to be sensationalist. What Rodri would do in this scenario is Rodri will look to be the first person to retrieve the ball from, say, for example, Stones and Diaz and Ederson. He will then usually, say, turn with the ball. Someone will try to press him, and his job will be just to lay the ball off to someone else who is free, who can then help move the ball further up the pitch. Now, where Rodri is going to be aided in this task is by the fullbacks that Manchester City typically employ, who will come in centrally. So this is where you'll hear the term inverted fullback. So again, when in English football, in the Premier League, we used to have systems like the 4-4-2. The fullback's job was essentially to back up the winger and get up and down the flank. When people like, well, not when people like, when Pep Guardiola came to the league, we then saw something new, which we called inverted fullbacks. So if you had a formation, for example, which was a 4-3-3, you've got three central midfielders, two ahead of one. The fullbacks, as they narrow, that one midfielder now has two people beside him, so effectively it's three. So a 4-3-3 can look like a 2-3-2-2-1 via all the players on the pitch. That felt like a lot, didn't it? So, Guardiola's plan was to retain possession and use the two centre backs as the first players and the goalkeeper as the first players to start to move possession up further up the pitch. So the goalkeeper, defender, midfielders, and fullbacks all work together to maintain possession and to methodically make their way up the pitch to forge a great chance to score. So if we think about flexibility, because even though Pep Guardiola is known as a manager who likes to retain possession, play it from the back, even he will be flexible when scenarios dictate it. So if the other team is a high pressing team, you will find that Ederson will tend to get involved more in the build-up simply because it effectively be an extra man on the pitch, and because Ederson is adept with the ball at his feet, he can also play short, mid, or long-range passes. Playing out from the back is sometimes not utilised in certain scenarios. So if Manchester City are playing against a team who have completely dropped off and show no intent to press the centre backs, they will just quickly move the ball forward into the midfield and try and retain possession and attack from there. Guardiola, despite having a very, very strong opinion on how his team should play, does have elements of being pragmatic, because at the end of the day, he realises this is a results-driven business, football. And if his team can score a goal, it then means the other team, to avoid losing, have to then open up a bit and then try and attack Manchester City, which only means that he can then implement ball playing out from the back and playing around them and scoring more goals. So it kind of, sometimes being pragmatic has to be a course of action. And one of the key things about playing out from the back, which also leads into the fact that Pep Guardiola favours a method of playing which leads towards retaining possession. And I should note, just to be clear, short passing in most scenarios. So short passing between the centre backs, short passing into the deep lying midfielder, so Rodri, short passes between him and then the inverted fullbacks, and then in front of those three, they just have effectively four midfielders and another striker. So you'll rarely see a Pep Guardiola team decide to knock the ball long, because the belief is short passes have a higher chance of being a pass completed, and if you want to retain possession, you want to effectively play passes that are likely to be received by their intended target. The Guardiola effect on the Premier League. His success has almost crystallized the belief in other managers that the way he wants to play is the way forward. So Guardiola's influence has led to other managers in the Premier League utilising very, very similar systems. So currently we have Mikel Arteta at Arsenal and Maresca at Chelsea, who have well, we can describe them as managers who want teams to retain possession, and that's their method of play. Arsenal, I have to say, as a team playing out from the back, very, very good at it. Two great centre backs in, especially with Saliba, playing out from the back with Raya as well, who's also a super keeper, is their modus operandi. Yes, yeah. And yes, to reiterate a point, since 2016, when Guardiola came to Manchester City in the Premier League, statistically, more and more teams are playing out from the back. And you'll notice this when you notice how many passes centre-backs are now having, how many progressive passes centre-backs are now making. And this only happens when they are being involved more in the play and passing the ball forward at short distances, as we noticed. This has also had an impact on the type of players that now move to the Premier League, simply because whereas it used to be players who were great physically and could run all day, it's now more based on prioritising players with great technical skill and tactical intelligence, because playing out from the back and retaining possession aren't just ways of playing. It's effectively a system, and with a system, you can change the starting formation, but the players will still play the same way. So, for example, I would know Guardiola as a manager who plays 4-3-3. There have been times when he's played a 3-4-3, but watching the team play, it still looks like it's the same thing. So the belief is playing out from the back, retaining possession. The formation the team lines up in isn't really the important bit. The important bit is playing out from the back as a means of kickstarting attacks. The success of Guardiola has led to, I want to call them acolytes. I'm sure they will disagree, but I'm going to go with acolytes. So we've seen Postecoglou at Spurs and the way they played, and we've seen De Zerbi, who has since left and gone to Marseille, also employ a very similar tactical method, system, plan as Guardiola. Play out from the back, loads of pressing, especially from the front, and recycling possession. What has the impact on the Premier League been, and what strategies can a team employ from a defensive point of view against a team who's playing out from the back? So we know that teams who employ playing out from the back and possession-orientated systems, they need players who, of course, are physically adept, in shape, all the rest of it, but technically proficient. What this has resulted in is teams pressing aggressively more from the front, so they're attacking players. So you can now end up with scenarios where you have attacking players trying to press the two centre-backs and goalkeeper to win possession. And in some scenarios, what teams will do is they'll look at a back four playing out from the back. And if one of the two central players, the centre backs, passes the ball to the fullback, some teams use that as what we now refer to as a trigger press. And they now decide, okay, so the ball's now in the corner, we're now going to flood forward and try and cover passing angles to effectively trap that player who's playing right back or left back and get the ball from them. So, what are the rewards of playing out from the back versus the potential risks? So, the rewards, playing out from the back allows the team to be more control with their possession and try and fashion out high quality attacking moves. This approach also allows the team with possession to try and disorganize and or disrupt the opponent's defensive shape, how they're organized, system, whatever you want to call it. As they disorientate and disorganize the opponent's team, it creates more space for them to attack as a team. And as we know, this tactic is designed to maintain possession and try and be more efficient in their attacking output. The risks of playing out from the back, the main risk is defensive errors. If you are playing out from the back and opposition is able to capture the ball or take it from you, you are extremely vulnerable because your defenders are the ones who lost the ball, and every single player in front of your defence is effectively out of the game as your opponent attacks. Um, errors playing out from the back often result in a goal conceded, and as every season is going by, statistically, more and more teams are being caught out by losing the ball whilst playing out from the back. So this highlights like a double-edged sword. You can disrupt the other team's defensive formational system, but you also make yourself more vulnerable to losing a goal via an error. So other influences outside of Guardiola in terms of playing out from the back. Um, there was a point in time when Chelsea had Maurizio Sarri, who came from, I want to say Lazio or Napoli, not so long ago. And Sarri ball was all about, it all emphasised retaining possession. And I remember watching him manage Napoli a few times. They would actually retain possession purposefully, but always try and recycle the ball to try and get the left back further down the pitch, and then right back would tuck in to make three centre backs, and the left back effectively became a left winger and was used as an outlet, which is quite interesting to see because when he went to Chelsea and then brought Jorginho with him, he tried to replicate the same thing, but it didn't quite work out because I guess due to the speed of English football. Um, Again, we should reiterate Jurgen Klopp, who came in with heavy metal football, so extreme high intensity pressing. But as time went by, even he started to incorporate a more controlled build up when Liverpool were attacking. Uh, we should also highlight the fact that in 2019 there was the rule change, which meant that when a goalkeeper had a goal kick, the ball had to leave the box, but it changed to whenever the ball is kicked, the ball's now in play. So this meant the goalkeeper could pass the ball to a player, like I said, the back, who was standing in the box. They'd receive the ball and they'd try and retain possession and play it from back from there. Now, it should also be noted that Pep Guardiola grew up in, he came from La Masia, so Barcelona's youth academy. But Barcelona's youth academy, it is almost the brainchild of Johan Cruyff. And the whole Cruyff system is all about, and his legacy, it's all about possession-based football. And even though Guardiola has been really successful playing out from back and retaining possession, it all stems from Johan Cruyff and his beliefs that were embedded into the Barca youth system, which Guardiola went through. So, our conclusion. Our conclusion is that Pep Guardiola's enduring, or his legacy, is going to be that he was the one who came to the Premier League and effectively made playing out from the back I think going forward, football is a global game. The Premier League is one of the biggest leagues in the world currently due to the finances, the exposure, maybe even time zone. And more and more managers are watching Pep do Pep things, and they're just copying what he does, trying to take elements and then incorporate it within their own beliefs of how football should be played. So yes, Guardiola has revolutionised playing out from back in Premier League. It's an innovation which has come from the philosophies that he grew up with at Barcelona. Um, his influence has now resulted in managers in the Premier League having to figure out different ways or different defensive strategies to disrupt other teams, their opponents, playing out from the back. Um, I want to say globally, without watching every league. You know, teams who are efficient or are good do incorporate playing out from the back simply because they know it means the opponent has to be more direct in pressing them. And if the opponent isn't actually able to play out from the back, they're likely to be as technically proficient, which means they can be played around and attacked. And I guess looking ahead, I think playing out from the back is something that's just going to become part of English football now and just something that we do going forward. So thank you very much, Pep Guardiola. You've now made watching a team playing out from the back and then a team trying to press them a bit of a mini game within the game. So with all that in mind, enjoy the rest of your day. Comments down below in the video. What do you think? What do you think? Has playing out from the back been an interesting tactical revolution in English football, or do you miss the good old days of the blood, guts and thunder and the more direct approach? I'm Wayne, it's been Gold by the Numbers. I'll catch you in the next one.